Today is Saturday, March 22nd, 2008, and we're interviewing Donald Porter at his home. Mr. Porter is 86 years old, having been born on April 24th of 1921. The interviewers' names are Lindsay Fisher and Jessica Schmitling. Don, could you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
The branch of service that I was in is the Air Force.
And what war did you serve in?
World War II.
Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I was drafted.
Do you recall your first days in the service?
Yes.
What were they like?
Well, I was drafted and sent to Jefferson Barracks for basic training, and from there I was assigned to radio school to take training to become a radio operator. That was in Chicago, stationed at the hotels, Congress and Stevens hotels, taking classes at night to learn Morse code and to be a radio operator. We were living in the Stevens hotel, but we went to classes in the basement of the Congress and the Stevens hotel. I guess that was just normal.
Tell me about your boot camp and training experiences.
Well, there isn't much to tell you except to follow the orders that they gave us at Jefferson Barracks.
What was your job or assignment?
I was sent to radio school to be a radio operator on an airplane.
Did you see any combat during your experiences?
I would say actual combat, no, because we were mostly behind the lines, flying supplies to the front lines and missions that they needed to fly troops or supplies, whatever they needed. We flew to the front lines, or as near the front lines as we could land, and fill out our mission.
Tell me about a couple of your most memorable experiences.
Well, one of the most memorable experiences I had was when we received orders to go from the European theater to the China, Burma, and India theater. We had been stationed at Comiso Airfield in Sicily for several months, and an order came through to supply a British Army with supplies in India. So we had to transfer from the European theater to the China, Burma, India theater. And my pilot was a captain, which was a little more rank than most of the pilots. So he was flying a lead plane, which means there was three of us in formation to transfer from European theater to the CBI theater. And as we took off to leave the airfield in Sicily, Italy, where we were based right on the Mediterranean, edge of the Mediterranean, we were to fly in a formation of three airplanes. And he was the lead pilot. Captain Lett was the lead pilot, which meant we would have a wing plane, one on each wing of us, to make this trip. So we got off of the ground, and the pilot asked the crew chief if he could see our wing planes. There was a plastic bubble in the top of the cabin of our C-47 airplane, and so Sergeant Tracy looked out the bubble and to see if he could locate our wing planes, and told the captain, he said, "I don't see the planes, Captain. I don't guess they got off with us." So he was going to make a 380 turn and let them catch up with us. Our plane had been loaded with a big generator that furnished electricity for the lines and for the squadron, and it weighed thousands of pounds. And we had that on board, and when he made this 380 bank, the two wing planes went underneath us, and we got caught in the prop wash, which set us up on our wing vertically. We were over the Mediterranean at this time, about 500 feet in the air. So we started dropping vertically, and the pilot made a obscene word saying, "GD, my controls don't work." when we got on this vertical in the air, and so that gave me quite a fright, because I knew that his controls had to work or we were going to end up in the Mediterranean. Well, they finally took hold enough that we could right ourselves, and we ended up about 100 feet above the Mediterranean, and the big generator did not slip. It stayed in place. If it had slipped, we would have never been able to right the airplane. So that was one of the experiences we had taking off to go to the China, Burma, and India theater. Now, what was another question?
Were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yes, after this mission that we took 3 months to accomplish in the CBI theater, my crew made 147 trips across enemy lines and landed at an airfield in what was called Imphal Valley. We had to supply a British army that was surrounded. The Japanese had them surrounded and they couldn't get out to get supplies, so we had to fly them everything that they had. And one of the things that amused me in these trips was we had to fly the mules and load these mules and fly them into this valley and unload them. Then next trip might be barrels of gasoline. The next trip might be ammunition. You never knew what the next trip was going to be, that we had to fly into this valley to supply this British army. And my job after the third day that we were down there was to monitor the radio to see if there was any enemy airplanes in the area. And I didn't have a frequency to monitor until the third day that we were making these trips into this valley. And I heard someone on the radio say, bandits, bandits. Well, I didn't know what they meant by bandits, but it was a British voice making this announcement, and he gave the location of the bandits. So I asked Captain Letts, what did this mean? He said, well, look out there and you'll see 2 Jap Zeros escorting a bomber plane, and those are the bandits that they're talking about. Well, we were concerned that they might leave the bomber plane and try to shoot us down, and our only defense would be to get down to treetop level so that if they dived down to shoot us down, they would go into the ground. Well, they did not leave their mission. They stayed with their bomber, but we were constantly avoiding enemy airplanes that might be in the area by the British, who had a good system of monitoring the Jap Zeros. They kept telling us where they were so we could avoid them. Our biggest enemy was weather rather than the Japanese, because we had a lot of bad weather in that area and we had to fly above the clouds, and it was only about a 45-minute flight to this valley where we landed, but we had to let down through the clouds into this valley, and many times you would look out the window and see a peak of a mountain very close to you. And the pilots would say, well, we were lucky again, because they had to judge where to let down and not hit a peak of these mountains up into the clouds.
What were some of your locations during your experience?
What were the locations of what?
What were some of your locations during your experience?
Well, the first location that I had after I got overseas was at Sicily, Italy, at this airfield. And then we were transferred to near Karachi, India. There was an air base that we flew these supplies into Imphal Valley. And after 3 months, we were able to supply the British to where they could fight their way out. And they didn't need us to supply them anymore with supplies, so they let us, an order came through to go back to European theater. Well, my group had moved from Sicily up to Rome, near Rome, an airfield there while we were away, the 3 months down in India. And then we were up near Rome, based during the time that southern France invasion was made, and we participated in that southern France invasion by dropping a glider with supplies, and then go back to our base near Rome and pick up paratroopers and fly them into the area and drop them. And this was not a very dangerous run, although we weren't sure that was going to happen, but there wasn't much danger from enemies. Airplanes are getting shot down. The biggest danger was on our second trip in there. It was after midnight, and there were so many airplanes making paratrooper drops and glider drops and flying in that area that my captain decided it was too dangerous to drop our load of paratroopers, because he could see running lights that were turned on every direction, and there was no formation or anything. They just were going every direction, and it was dangerous to try to drop your load of paratroopers in a certain spot. So he flew us up over northern France for a couple of hours to where most of the airplanes had made their drops, and then we went back into that area and dropped our paratroopers. So that was one of the situations that could have been dangerous.
Can you describe the geography of the region in which you were stationed?
Well, I don't know if I can, other than in the India area, it was very mountainous, and we constantly were watching that we didn't hit the top of a mountain.
Were there any advantages or disadvantages of the geography?
No, mostly weather was our threat. We had to combat weather. Many times it was raining and cloudy to where we didn't have very good visibility.
When you were in the service, how did you stay in touch with your family?
By letter.
Letter? How did the people entertain themselves?
Well, when we had free time, I guess playing cards was one of the pastimes, and sightseeing. There was many places I got to go and see that without this service I would have never had the opportunity of. For example, on the way to China, Burma, and India, we got to land in Egypt and visit the pyramids. And then further on, we got to stop and visit the Taj Mahal. And in Italy, I got to see Rome and many places in Italy that I never would have been able to see if it hadn't been for service. And Leaning Tower of Pisa. Got to make trips just in our off time to see places like that.
Were there any entertainers who visited your unit?
I can't recall any entertainers that we may have had.
What was the food like where you were stationed?
Well, it was, I would say, mostly very good.
What did you think of your higher officers and fellow soldiers?
I respected all of them.
Do you recall the day your service ended?
Yes, I recall that.
What were some of the emotions that you felt during that time?
What was the question?
What were some of the emotions you felt during that time?
Well, you waited to get your papers to be discharged, so it was no surprise when it finally came through, and I was very, very glad to get discharged so I could come home.
Okay. Did you work or go back to school?
I worked.
Did you make any close friendships while you were in the service?
Yes.
Do you continue any of those relationships?
Do I consider...
Did you continue any of the relationships after you were out of service?
Not with service personnel, but while I was in service, I met a girl that worked with sergeant's wife that gave out passes to us when we needed wanted a pass. I got to know him real well, and he asked me home for dinner with him. And his wife had asked her girlfriend that she worked with for dinner, and I met a girl named Ruth Miller, who is still my wife after 62 years.
What did you go on to do as a career after the war?
Went into selling. My brother was currently selling encyclopedias, sterling silver, and when we could get it, cookware. And I had previous experience 4 years before service of selling cookware. So when it became available after the war, I went back into selling cookware. And in the meantime, we couldn't, when I first got discharged, the plants that made cookware were not back in production. So sterling silver and encyclopedias were available to sell. So I sold those for a while. And when cookware became available, I went back into demonstrating cookware and stayed with that until a heart attack and physical things caused me to have to give up selling.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I'm sure it has influenced me because war is not a pleasant thing, and it's influenced me to feel that we should stay out of war if we can.
So how do you feel about the war that's going on in Iraq?
I feel it should be brought to a conclusion.
How did your service and experiences affect your life now?
Well, I don't think at this time it has affected my life.
What is your best memory of your service in the military?
Well, I guess my best memory is just doing the job that you were assigned to do.
And what was your worst memory about your service in the military?
Well, there were times that you weren't in a very comfortable situation when you had to sleep in tents and it was cold, and overall it wasn't too bad.
How did you feel when you were awarded your distinct flying medal?
How did I feel when what?
When you were awarded your distinguished flying medal.
Well, I was pleased that we were awarded, for example, the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is one of the highest honors the Air Force can give out. But having made 147 trips across enemy lines and landed safely and returning, the crews that did this were awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross by Major General Cannon, and that award caused me to be able to fly back to the States instead of ride a boat, because when we were waiting for a boat to come back, when orders came back to go back to the States, we were waiting in Naples for a boat, and an order came through. A sergeant was calling off names, and when he called my name, I asked, well, what are you calling my name off for? He said, well, anyone with the Distinguished Flying Cross has bumped the higher ranked officers, everybody that was supposed to fly back, such as a general or a major or whatever his rank might be, got bumped by the people who have Distinguished Flying Crosses. So that was one of the things that I was appreciative of, because the first 2 weeks of going overseas by boat, I stayed seasick the whole time, and that wasn't very pleasant to look forward to, going back on the boat. So that's one of the nice things about the award that I can speak of.
Were you ever at the front or under fire?
No, but I was under fire behind the lines at one point. When we got back from the China-Burman-India Theater. We didn't go back to the same airfield that we left. In Sicily, when we were stationed there, we could buy vegetables and fresh fruit and eggs and a lot of things for the mess hall that, as they moved north further following the Patton and up near Rome, where we now were based when we got back from CBI Theater, those fresh vegetables and fruits were not available. And they took turns having an airplane go back to the field and take a jeep and a crew along and go into town and buy vegetables and fruits for the squadron for a period of time. So on one of these occasions, my plane and crew was called to make this trip. So we flew down to Italy and landed, and they'd sent a couple of guys, soldiers, with us to take the jeep, unload the jeep, and take it into town and buy vegetables and eggs and fresh things for the mess hall. And so that left us a couple of hours of waiting for the crew to come back with the jeep loaded with food. And an old man that lived at the end of the airport, he and his wife used to wash clothes for some of the soldiers and buy cigarettes. If anybody would sell him cigarettes, he would buy cigarettes from them. This old man had came up to the end of the runway where we were waiting for the jeep to go into town and bring back food. And he came up to the plane and asked in his broken English if we had any cigarettes he could buy, which Tracy and I did have, because neither of us smoked, and our ration of cigarettes we would save and sell. I don't remember, it seems to me we would get near $10 a carton for them, and they just cost us a few pennies, you might say. So I sold all the cigarettes that I was allotted when I was overseas. But in him coming up and asking us to buy cigarettes, he also said, well, in broken English, come down to my house and have a glass of wine with my wife and I. So Tracy and I, Tracy was my crew chief, asked the pilots if we could go down to his house, which was at the other end of the airport, and have a glass of wine with him. They said, well, sure. We're going to be here at least 2 hours. As long as you're back in 2 hours, be fine. So the old man had rode his bicycle up to our airplane. So he was walking with us down the airplane on one side of the runway, walking and leading his bicycle, and we were walking with him. And we got about a quarter of a mile down the runway, and I heard bullets going zing that hit the ground, and you see dirt where the bullets hit the ground flying. And I said, Tracy, someone is shooting at us. And across the runway, bombed out hangars, there were, so this Italian that was buying cigarettes from us said it was fascists over there shooting at us. And he rolled up his sleeve and showed us a scar on his arm. He said, fascists do this to me. And so the paratroopers, when they landed and took that Sicily and Italy and that part, had left slip trenches along the runway. And Tracy and I jumped in these slip trenches to get out of the way of being hit with bullets. Fortunately, none of them hit us, but they were flying all around us, and you could hear them hit and go zing, blanch off. And here we're laying in those slip trenches laughing hysterically, but scared, because we thought we were going to get killed. And we trying to decide what to do. And I remembered that there was a guard at the end of the runway as we come in to land that had a rifle, and was I told the old man that was up on the bank yet, he didn't jump down in the slip trenches with us. I said, go get the guard. And so he walks down with his bicycle to the other end of the runway and brings the guard back. Well, in the meantime, Tracy and I were talking about this guard, might be a fascist as the guys that's across the runway shooting at us. So suppose he's a fascist too. And when he gets up here with that rifle, he's going to try to kill us. So we decided that we'd let the old man and the guard get as close to us as we could, and we'd jump out, and I said, Tracy, you're bigger than I am. You grab him, and I'll take his rifle. So we waited till they got real close to us, and then we jumped out, and Tracy grabbed and put his arms around the guard, and I took his rifle, and then we walked back to the airplane, and we asked the pilot if he wanted us to try to capture those guys that were shooting at us, because we had a Tommy gun on the airplane. Said we can take the Tommy gun and go over there and try to capture them. And he said no. The pilot says we fly airplanes. Says we're not in that kind of a combat. So he said you wait here until they get back with the Jeep and we'll take off. And that's what we did. But that was one of the times that although we were not in the combat area anymore, there had been some diehards, I guess, or fascists that maybe they had family that when we bombed Italy that were killed, and they still hated us. At least they were trying to shoot us. So I had that experience that I haven't forgotten.
And how long were you in the service?
Just a little short of 3 years.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
No, I can't think of anything other than the questions that you have asked.
Any other stories that you have?
I don't think of any right now.
Okay. Do you have any photographs you would like to share or explain to us?
Yes, I do have several pictures that I can give you that I'll explain what they are, that you can put with your interview. I'll explain what some of them. Picture when we stopped in Egypt of the pyramids, and I'm riding a camel there, and this is my picture at that time, and here is a picture of the Sphinx in Egypt. This picture is our C-47 airplane that I got a little over 1,000 hours overseas time flying. And that's when an order came through that grounded us. When you got 1,000 hours, you were grounded, and then I got to come home. So I was only overseas 11 months. Here's a picture of trying to load one of the mules on the airplane. You can see we had to push him on. He didn't want to get on board the airplane. But here's another picture of him coming off of the airplane. He was very gentle and gave us no trouble to lead him off of the airplane. And then this is a picture where Major General Cannon is making the Distinguished Flying Awards to the crews that were in the CBI theater and made their drops in flying into that valley. But this soldier he's pinning the award on, I forget his name, but he's next to me. I'm the picture next to him, which I was the next one to get the award. And here is a picture after he made the awards. There's a formation of about 40 C-47s flying over on that episode where he gave out awards. This picture of my airplane with the wing parallel with the ground, laying on the ground. This happened when we were flying supplies up to supply General Patton. And it was on a little airfield where Americans had bombed it, and they had filled the bomb craters with dirt, and we didn't realize that we were taxiing over one of the bomb craters, and it was fresh dirt enough that we fell into that bomb crater about 3 feet. And they had to get a huge crane to pick us up, to pick the airplane up and get us out of that bomb crater so we could fly on home. And this picture is of graves that are being dug up by the French. The Germans when they were going north through France, Patton was pushing them so hard that when they left one area in France, the forced labor that they had, they killed them and buried them rather than have to guard them and take them with them. And when we learned that there were graves where people were buried there, we turned it over to the French to dig up their relatives and friends. This picture shows an American nurse standing as they unloaded litter patients. Many of our loads was wounded that were flown back from the front lines, and when we hauled wounded back, we always carried a registered nurse with us in the airplane in case something happened to one of the patients. And then this picture is of German soldiers being brought back that was captured. So you might find those pictures interesting to put with your records.